The founding principles of the American constitutional republic are based above all else on a realistic view of unchanging human nature and a profound skepticism about the ability of government to change human behavior. That is why the Constitution is so clear in limiting and enumerating the powers and responsibilities of the federal government. So what to make of the longest war in American history? It's a war that's now 50 years old. Yes, in his first State of the Union address in 1964, President Lyndon Baines Johnson declared unconditional war on poverty in America and said, "We shall not rest until that war is won." The few years following that announcement would see the creation of Medicaid, Medicare, and at least a dozen other federal programs to transfer wealth to poor Americans, ballooning to the current 126 federal anti-poverty programs. But from about the time LBJ's reforms were fully implemented until now, the poverty rate has remained roughly the same. We've spent 15 trillion tax dollars fighting poverty since LBJ's inauguration with these results. The poverty rate in 1969 was 13.7%. In 2009, it was 14.3%. Now, these anti-poverty programs have not been a complete failure because they have elevated the living standard of poor people in America. It would be almost impossible not to achieve that minimal goal when throwing so many trillions at the problem, but any honest assessment of the war must acknowledge these gains. Being poor in America in 2014 is much different than being poor in America in 1964, or for that matter, being poor in 2014 in most of the rest of the world. Our poor typically live in decent housing with air conditioning and cable TV and are not undernourished and do not go hungry. That so much human suffering from real hunger, malnutrition, and destitution has been reduced or eliminated is no small thing. But that hardly means we should fail to consider whether $15 trillion of taxpayers' money has been well spent, or that anything near that amount should have been spent in the first place, or the unintended consequences of this war, most notably the dramatic debt we've incurred from the war and its undeniable damage to the American family. In the Medicare program alone, we've accumulated a staggering $100 trillion in future debts we have no way to pay. And the profound damage to the American family can effectively be illustrated by the fact that 7 times as many babies are born out of wedlock today as when this war began. Only the government could actually ramp up spending so dramatically on a war that's not come close to achieving its objectives. In 1965, we spent about 2% of the gross domestic product, GDP, on welfare programs. Today, we have tripled that spending to about 6% of GDP, with no actual reduction in poverty to show for it. Sadly, our programs enacted at great cost haven't really helped the poor to elevate themselves at all. We're giving away tons of fish, but providing no fishing lessons. Indeed, most anti-poverty programs are focused on making poverty more comfortable rather than giving people the tools that will help them escape poverty. This 50-year-old war on poverty, just like the 40-year-old war on drugs, involves massive spending and negligible results coupled with colossal levels of waste, fraud, abuse, and disincentives for productivity, and everyone knows it. In any universe other than government, people engaged in huge spending demand huge results. Not so with government programs, which are perpetuated not because they work, but because they are, as Ronald Reagan so eloquently described them, the nearest thing to eternal life we will ever see on this earth.